Do you know why this car could get the BeamNG devs into legal trouble? Or that the West Coast map hides a population of over 14,000 people? No? Well, you're about to waste 13 minutes on totally useless facts about BeamNG. The logo of the fictional off-road brand Facer is pretty much identical to Fanatec's logo. Fanatec is a real-life German sim racing equipment brand, and while this could just be a coincidence, I find it interesting that the devs used the logo for an in-game wheel brand that resembles a real-life steering wheel brand. At the entrance to the automation test track, there's a sign that says Kurapae Test Center. I apologize for the pronunciation. Since the map is set in New Zealand, you've probably guessed that's Maori. Kurapae simply translates to beam, so the sign actually reads Beam Test Center. That was in character for the ETK I-Series drift configuration. Its description literally says, slide into the DMs of your nearest tire wall. And that's not the only funny Easter egg in vehicle descriptions. For instance, the Lansdale Sport Police van references the stereotype of soccer moms doing nothing else than driving their kids to practice. The Soviet Wendover has the Think Appliances 10,000 configuration with a very detailed backstory, and unsurprisingly, most Gambler 500 vehicles have unserious joke descriptions too. If you're ever bored, just scroll through the vehicle selector, you will have a laugh. When tree logs were introduced in update 0.32, they had little to no friction on water, meaning that once moving, they acted like speedboats. This has since been fixed for standalone props, but if you still want to try it out, you can use the logs from the logging truck. Long before Garage Mode was reintroduced in 2022, BeamNG's garage map looked fundamentally different. Instead of today's plain empty hall, it was filled with props and hidden Easter eggs. One of my favorite ones has got to be the What the F 420 spray can, a parody of WD40 with the letters and numbers slightly changed. The label text itself is too low resolution to read in-game, but after running it through some upscalers, we can assume what it says. The pool at the motel on the West Coast USA map doesn't actually have any water inside. It uses a blue painted grid map texture to create the illusion instead. This only becomes apparent in free cam and isn't really visible when driving past. Inside the recently added Limousine, the TV displays pictures referencing scenes from 9 different movies. Let me know if you've watched any of them. Also in the limo, right next to the bottles of the in-game brand Tasty, which produces Coke and orange juice apparently, you can spot the real-life BeamNG mug, the same one you can buy from the merch store. And yes, it even breaks when you crash. But that's not all. The limo's radio is tuned to FM 87.3. If you Google it, you'll see it's an actual radio station in Duisburg, Germany, not too far from BeamNG's headquarters in Bremen. Coincidence? Maybe. One of my favorite showcases of BeamNG's physics is the sliding door on the Lansdale minivan. Leave it open while driving and let off the throttle, the door actually closes itself because engine braking slows down the car. It will even shut on a slow, but hold down the clutch to deactivate engine braking and the door just stays open. Speaking of steep streets, Belasco City is clearly based on San Francisco. Now, besides steep streets, San Francisco is famous for the Golden Gate Bridge, but BeamNG's version doesn't include a direct counterpart. Instead, it has the massive Platin Gate Bridge leading to Spearleaf Island. At first glance, you'd think it's just their version of the Golden Gate, but geographically and color-wise it lines up more with the Bay Bridge. The Bay Bridge connects San Francisco to Oakland via Yerba Buena Island, and Yerba Buena means good herb. spearleaf is a herb, so it's safe to say that Spearleaf Island is BeamNG's equivalent to Yerba Buena. This makes the Platin Gate Bridge the counterpart of the Bay Bridge. Do whatever you want with that information. It's much trickier to figure out which real-world locations the other BeamNG maps are based on. The only reliable clue is the license plate design, which differs from map to map. I've painstakingly gone through all the default maps to create this overview showing which map corresponds to which US state. A high quality version is available for download in the description. Italy is obviously based on Italy and the ETK test center in Germany. Automation test track is set in New Zealand as previously mentioned. However, with a little more digging we can actually pinpoint the exact locations. For example, on the Utah map there's a sign that mentions Moab, which is a real city in eastern Utah. Photos from the area make it clear that Moab was indeed the inspiration for the BeamNG devs. Johnson Valley is just Johnson Valley in California. Jungle Rock Island has a whole lore of its own that goes far beyond the scope of this video, but in short, the island likely lies somewhere in Hawaii as the license plates and tropical vegetation suggest. There are hints that it has been Japanese in the past though, but check out the linked video for the full version of this theory. Unlike most other car games where roads are way too wide, most roads in BeamNG have realistic lane dimensions. While you can fit up to 4 cars in one lane in Forza Horizon 5 for example, you will have trouble even fitting 2 onto one lane in BeamNG. This might seem like an insignificant fact, but this one actually does contribute to a very important aspect of racing games. It produces a much greater sense of speed. For the calculation at the beginning, I counted all buildings on the West Coast map, grouped them by size, removed non-residential facilities, and googled how many people live in each type in San Francisco on average. That leaves us with an estimate of around 14,500 residents for the entire map. I honestly don't know what I expected, but it does seem weird that Belasco has fewer residents than the town I live in. I have added a link to the spreadsheet in the description, but keep in mind that the numbers are estimates and therefore not entirely correct. Occasionally, a Gabriel HC responds in AI traffic with a livery that asks you to rate their driving. Belasco's police liveries are strikingly similar to Washington DC's, kinda weird considering they're on opposite sides of the US. When BeamNG's first trailers dropped in 2012, they went viral overnight. CEO Thomas Fischer later said it was their unexpected big breakthrough in an interview with a German newspaper. One reason for the hype might have been an odd one though. GTA 4 came out in 2008 and fans were eagerly awaiting the next part of the franchise. GTA 4 was known for realistic car damage, so when the BeamNG trailers appeared, people thought they were leaked GTA 5 footage. This conspiracy theory was further strengthened by people re-uploading the trailers and calling them leaked GTA 5 footage. Little did they know that GTA 5 would actually be a huge step backwards in physics. If you open Steam, right-click BeamNG, go to Properties and Launch Options and then enter Console, a log window will appear the next time you start the game. This might help if your debugging game crashes, but since there are easier ways to do that, it's totally useless for normal players. If you go to the observatory on Jungle Rock Island, you can hear airplane sounds. Even though the only airplane in the entire game is this run-down abandoned one in the island's hangar. To me, it looks a lot like the Mitsubishi J2M, which actually strengthens the previously mentioned theory about Jungle Rock Island having some World War II related lore. Theoretically, you can hear the airplane sounds across various maps, but I have found they're almost always most noticeable at the observatory. In older versions of BeamNG, the main menu background was a video. Sadly, the video decoder broke in 2021, so they had to switch to static backgrounds. There is still one way to get animated backgrounds though. Change the file type to GIF. The performance is super poor on all devices I tried, but at least it's cool to look at. Anyone who's played BeamNG knows that there are no humans in the game. However, that's not completely true. There are several artwork posters that show humans, and in the Rocky Star campaign there are animated sequences featuring human characters. The East Coast map features a fire watchtower. Seems irrelevant, but it might actually be a reference to the devastating wildfires in Maine in 1947. If you paid attention to the map previously, you might have noticed that not only the East Coast USA map, but also Orochi Raceway are based in Maine and New Hampshire. The devs might have done this so they could reuse assets in both maps, or maybe Orochi Raceway was originally supposed to be part of the East Coast map, like the Raceway on West Coast USA. Speaking of it, you might have noticed that it has blue curbs, which are pretty rare in real life. The most well-known example might be Laguna Seca, which is also in California, just like the West Coast map. You can find the infamous corkscrew chicane from Laguna Seca on Belasco Raceway as well, just mirrored. Still, it's pretty obvious that the devs drew inspiration from Laguna Seca when designing this track. On either side of the jump in Utah, there are signs with 46 of 58 written on them. These refer to the speed in miles per hour you need to nail the jump perfectly. So I guess it's not a totally useless fact after all. Most people, including myself, think of BeamNG as a very niche game, kind of a hidden gem. But looking at the player count on Steam, that's not the case at all. The player count of BeamNG is ridiculously high and consistent. It's almost always among the top 5 or even top 3 racing games on Steam, which is insane considering the dev team is rather small and indie. The weight swaying simulation in light vehicles like the Pigeon and Vision is super realistic. It even accounts for sudden G-forces, simulating seat belts and the driver hitting the dash or doors. The off-roading index as calculated for vanilla vehicles doesn't make much sense. I highly doubt that the base Piccolina and the Baja buggy have the same off-roading capabilities. The map on dashboard of vehicles doesn't show directions, so you need to rely on the navigation arrows or the mini-map UI app. This is strange because before the UI app was revamped in 0.37, it was identical to the one displayed on the dashboard. The game files contain 19 font families, however, I'm not sure if every single one of them is actually used in-game. You can drive electric vehicles underwater in BeamNG without the engine flooding. Since electric motors don't need oxygen, that part isn't even unrealistic. But in real life, the rest of the car definitely wouldn't be waterproof enough to survive. The castle in Castelletto has been under renovation since 2007, which is still ongoing apparently. I hope you enjoyed these solid 13 minutes of useless BeamNG facts, and if you know any that weren't mentioned in the video, please share them in the comments. See ya next time!